I'm Dr. Marcus Chen, a neurosurgeon from Boston. I've spent 18 years navigating the intricate pathways of the human brain, fixing what breaks, saving who I could. I trusted science. I trusted data. I trusted what I could measure, touch, see under a microscope. But on December 7th, 2025, everything I knew shattered in a moment so violent, so utterly impossible, that I'm still trying to find words that do it justice. What Jesus showed me in that moment contradicts everything the church has been teaching. And you need to hear this now, because what I'm about to share could change your eternity. It started with a simple morning jog along the Charles River. The air was sharp, winter cold, my breath clouding in front of me with each exhale. I remember the rhythm of my feet hitting the frozen path, the satisfying burn in my lungs, the way the early sun painted everything in shades of pale gold. Normal, routine, the kind of morning I'd lived 1,000 times before. Then my foot caught on something. A root maybe, or a patch of black ice I hadn't seen. The world tilted. My body lurched forward, arms flailing uselessly. And then came the impact, not with the ground, with the metal railing separating the path from the river. I felt my skull crack. I actually heard it, this sickening wet sound like a branch snapping in half, and then pain exploded through my head with such intensity that my vision went pure white. The cold hit next. The Charles River in December is barely above freezing, and when I plunged beneath the surface, it felt like 1,000 knives stabbing every inch of my skin simultaneously. I tried to swim. My arms wouldn't respond. The current pulled me under, and I watched the surface above me grow dimmer. The pale morning light fading to grey, then darker grey, then nothing. My lungs screamed for air. I held my breath as long as I could, maybe 30 seconds, maybe less, and then my body betrayed me. I gasped. Water flooded my throat, my lungs, and the pain was beyond anything I'd ever imagined. Drowning doesn't feel like falling asleep. It feels like being ripped apart from the inside. Then everything stopped. The pain vanished. The cold disappeared. I wasn't in the water anymore. I was floating above it, looking down at my own body being pulled from the river by 2 early morning joggers. I could see everything with perfect clarity. The panic on their faces, the way my lips had already turned blue, the unnatural angle of my neck. One of them was on the phone, screaming for an ambulance, and the other was starting CPR. But I could tell from the way my chest didn't rise properly that it wasn't working. I was dead. Clinically, medically dead. 4 minutes without oxygen to the brain. I knew the statistics better than anyone. 4 minutes meant irreversible damage. 4 minutes meant even if they brought me back, I wouldn't be me anymore. But I wasn't scared. I should have been terrified. But instead, I felt this overwhelming sense of peace washing over me like warm water. I wasn't in pain anymore. I wasn't cold. I was just there, observing, floating, existing outside my body in a way that made perfect sense, even though it shouldn't have. Then the light came. It wasn't like looking at the sun or staring at a bulb that's too bright. It was softer than that, warmer, but somehow more intense at the same time. It filled everything. It didn't have a source I could point to. It just existed everywhere, all at once. And it was pulling me toward it with a gentle but irresistible force. I let it take me. What else was I supposed to do? And as I moved toward the light, the world around me changed. The river, the joggers, my body, all of it faded away until there was nothing but this endless expanse of brilliance. Colors I'd never seen before swirled through the light. How do you describe a color that doesn't exist in the physical world? I can't, but they were there, and they were beautiful, and they filled me with emotions I didn't have names for. Then I saw him. Jesus didn't look like the paintings. He didn't have long, flowing hair or a neatly trimmed beard or those gentle eyes you see in churches. He was light itself, shaped roughly like a man, but constantly shifting, constantly radiating this energy that made every atom in my being vibrate with recognition. I knew who he was the same way you know your own name. There was no question, no doubt, this was Christ. His voice wasn't audible. I didn't hear it with my ears because I didn't have ears anymore. But I felt it resonating through every part of my consciousness, warm and powerful and absolutely certain. "Marcus," he said, and hearing my name spoken that way made me want to weep. "Why do you cling to what you think you know?" I tried to respond, but I didn't know how. I didn't have a mouth, I didn't have vocal cords. But somehow he heard my thoughts anyway. "I'm a man of science," I thought at him. I trusted the evidence. I trusted what was real. "And what is real?" he asked. And suddenly we weren't in the light anymore. We were standing in an operating room. My operating room. I recognized it immediately. Massachusetts General Hospital, 4th floor, OR 7. But we were watching it from above, looking down at a surgery I'd performed maybe 3 months earlier, a young woman with a brain tumor the size of a golf ball. I remembered her, 26 years old, engaged to be married, her whole life ahead of her. I watched myself working on her brain with microscopic precision, removing the tumor bit by bit, trying to preserve as much healthy tissue as possible. I'd been so proud of that surgery, 12 hours straight, and I'd gotten it all. She'd walked out of the hospital 2 weeks later with minimal deficits, a success by every medical metric. But then Jesus showed me something I hadn't seen, something I couldn't have seen. He showed me the moment during surgery when her soul had briefly separated from her body, hovering above the operating table just like I was hovering above the river. She'd been aware, conscious, watching me cut into her brain while her body lay motionless below, and she'd been terrified. She called out to God, Jesus said. She begged for mercy. She promised to change her life if I let her live, and I did. But you never knew. You thought you saved her with your skills alone. The operating room dissolved, and we were back in the light, but the light felt different now, less comforting, more exposing. You trusted the evidence, Jesus continued, but you only saw evidence you were looking for. You measured brain activity and declared consciousness. You studied neurons and thought you understood the soul. You called yourself a healer, but you never once considered that healing comes from me. I wanted to argue. I wanted to defend myself, explain that medicine is science, that we save people through knowledge and technique and years of training, but the words died before they could form. Because I knew he was right. I'd spent 18 years cutting into human brains, and not once had I acknowledged the possibility that there was something beyond the tissue and electricity I could measure. Not once had I considered that the miraculous recoveries I'd witnessed might actually be miracles. I'd attributed everything to skill, to chance, to the resilience of the human body, never to God. I felt shame then. Hot, crushing shame that made the light around me seem dimmer. "The church taught you about me," Jesus said, "but they taught you wrong." That caught my attention. The church taught wrong? How? They told you salvation comes through rituals, through confession and communion and following rules written by men who claim to speak for me. They told you to fear hell and work for heaven. They told you that doubt is sin and questioning is weakness. He paused, and the light pulsed brighter. But I never said any of that. The world shifted again. Now we were standing in a massive cathedral, St. Peter's Basilica, I realized. The Vatican. But it wasn't the Vatican I knew from documentaries and tourist photos. This was the Vatican as it existed right now. In December 2025, and something was happening. I could see cardinals gathered in heated discussion. I could see Pope Leo XIV standing before them, his face lined with exhaustion and frustration. They were arguing about something, voices raised, hands gesturing wildly. and in the center of the debate was a single word that kept repeating over and over: co-redemptrix. I didn't understand what I was seeing. What did that mean? They want to make Mary equal to me, Jesus explained. They want to declare that salvation comes through her intercession as much as through my sacrifice. They've been debating it for decades, and now, in these final days of the year, they're pushing for a decision. Final days of the year. Something about the way he said that made my skin prickle. And what will happen, I asked. The proposal will be rejected, Jesus said, but not for the right reasons. They'll reject it because they fear division, not because they understand the truth. They've built an institution around my name, but they've forgotten my message. The Vatican disappeared, and we were back in the endless light. Just me and Jesus face to face, and the weight of his presence was almost too much to bear. The church has misunderstood who I am, he said. They've turned love into law. They've made salvation a transaction. They've created hierarchies and dogmas and rules, and they've told you that following those rules is how you reach heaven. His energy shifted, becoming more intense. But I came to set you free, Marcus, not to give you more chains. I felt something breaking inside me. Every Sunday Mass I'd sat through, every prayer I'd recited without thinking about the words, every confession where I'd listed my sins like items on a grocery list, expecting absolution because I'd said the right phrases to a priest in a box. It had all been ritual, performance. Going through the motions because that's what you were supposed to do if you wanted to be saved. But Jesus was saying it didn't work that way. Then how? I asked. How does it work? Before he could answer, everything changed. The light around us began to crack. Not metaphorically, literally, like reality itself was a pane of glass and something was hitting it from the other side. Trying to break through. Fractures spread through the brightness, dark lines appearing where there should only be illumination, and through those cracks I could see something else. Something vast and terrible and wrong. What is that? I asked. But I already knew. Somehow, impossibly, I knew. The end, Jesus said, and his voice carried a sadness so profound it made me want to weep. This is what's coming. This is what I tried to warn them about, but they weren't listening. They're still not listening. The cracks spread wider. Through them, I glimpsed images that didn't make sense. Cities crumbling, skies on fire, people screaming. But it wasn't destruction like war or natural disaster. It was something else, something fundamental breaking down. Like the laws that held reality together were unraveling, and when they finished unraveling, there would be nothing left but chaos. When? I asked. When is this coming? Soon, Jesus said. Sooner than they think. The signs are all there. They just refuse to see them. I wanted to ask more. I needed to understand, but the light was pulling away from me now, and I could feel something else pulling in the opposite direction, something insistent and painful and familiar. My body. They were bringing me back. No, I tried to say. I need to know more. I need to understand what you mean. What is the end? How do we stop it? What does any of this have to do with salvation? But Jesus was already fading, the light dimming, the cracks sealing themselves shut. His final words echoed through my consciousness as everything went dark. Tell them the truth, Marcus. Tell them what I showed you. Tell them the church has been wrong. Tell them about the end. Tell them before it's too late. Then pain exploded through my chest as the defibrillator shocked my heart back into rhythm, and I was gasping, choking, coughing up river water onto the frozen ground while paramedics shouted medical jargon above me. I was alive, but I'd been dead. I'd been with Jesus, and he'd shown me something that contradicted 18 years of medical training and 34 years of Catholic faith. The church has been teaching us wrong. Salvation doesn't work the way they said, and something called the end is coming soon. I didn't understand what it meant yet. I didn't know how to process what I'd seen. But lying there on the banks of the Charles River, shivering and confused and fundamentally changed, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Everything I thought I knew about life, death, God, and eternity had just been shattered. And the truth Jesus showed me was far more terrifying and far more beautiful than anything I could have imagined. Because December 2025 isn't random. The timing, the new pope, the shifts happening in the Vatican right now, the winter solstice marking the darkest night before light returns. This is divine orchestration. When Jesus showed me what was about to unfold, he said the veil between heaven and earth is thinner now than it's been in centuries. The 24 hours isn't manipulation. It's alignment with cosmic truth. And if you're hearing this right now, that's not coincidence either. You were meant to witness what I'm about to share. So here's what Jesus showed me about the end. I was still suspended in that infinite space, surrounded by a love so overwhelming it felt like it could consume me entirely. And that's when he appeared. Not the gentle shepherd from Sunday school paintings. This was Christ in his full divine authority. His presence was both terrifying and irresistible. The light emanating from him wasn't just bright, it was alive, intelligent. Every photon carried truth, and when it touched me, I understood things my earthly mind had never grasped. He extended his hand toward me, and the moment our hands connected, everything shifted. I wasn't just seeing anymore, I was experiencing. He took me forward, through time itself, and showed me what the religious establishment has been calling the end times for 2,000 years. But here's what will shock you. What will overturn everything you've been taught in church. The end isn't the apocalypse. It's not fire raining from the sky or the earth splitting open to swallow sinners. It's not Jesus returning on clouds to judge humanity while angels blow trumpets and demons drag souls to eternal torment. The end is awakening. Let me say that again, because this is the truth that's been hidden from you. The end that Jesus showed me, that he's been trying to communicate through mystics and prophets for millennia, is the collective spiritual awakening of humanity. It's the moment when enough souls remember who they really are, divine beings having a temporary human experience, that the entire frequency of Earth shifts. He said to me, and I will never forget these exact words, "This is what I've been trying to teach, but institutions distorted it into fear and control. I never came to condemn. I came to show humanity that the kingdom of heaven isn't a place you go when you die. It's a state of consciousness you can access right now in this very moment by recognizing your true nature as eternal, beloved children of the divine." I felt my entire understanding of reality shatter and rebuild in that instant. The fear I'd carried my whole life, the guilt about not being good enough, the terror of divine judgment, it all dissolved. Because the end isn't something to fear. It's something to celebrate. It's the end of illusion, the end of separation, the end of the false belief that we're separate from God, from each other, from the unified field of divine love that permeates all existence. He showed me visions, sensory experiences so vivid I can still feel them burning in my cells. I saw humanity waking up, one soul at a time. I saw people who'd been trapped in religious dogma suddenly understanding that rules and rituals were never the point. The point was always love, unconditional, non-judgmental, transformative love. I saw atheists experiencing divine presence for the first time and weeping with relief because finally they understood they'd never been abandoned. I saw people from every religion, every background, every corner of the earth, all simultaneously recognizing the same truth: we are one. And here's the part that made me weep with joy and terror simultaneously. He showed me that this awakening, this end, is happening right now. Not in some distant future, not after tribulation or rapture, or any of the fear-based scenarios the church has been selling. It's happening in December 2025, in this very moment as you watch this video, in every heart that's ready to receive it. The institutions don't want you to know this. Because if you understood that you have direct access to divine truth, that you don't need intermediaries or hierarchies or confession booths or tithing to earn God's love, their entire power structure collapses. That's why they've been teaching you to fear the end. Fear keeps you compliant. Fear keeps you coming back, seeking salvation from the very people who convinced you that you needed saving in the first place. But Jesus told me something else, something that changed my entire life trajectory. He said, "The ones who awaken first, they become beacons for others. Their transformed lives, their peace in the midst of chaos, their love in the face of hatred. This is the evidence that makes others curious. This is how the awakening spreads, not through conversion or conquest, but through contagion of consciousness." And that's exactly what happened to me. Before my near-death experience, I was a forensic accountant. Numbers, logic, proof, that was my religion. I went to church on major holidays to keep my mother happy, but I didn't really believe. I thought religious people were either naive or desperate, clinging to fairy tales because reality was too harsh. But when I came back, when I woke up in that hospital bed with Jesus's words still echoing in my consciousness, I was fundamentally different. The old me, the skeptical forensic accountant who needed empirical evidence for everything, she died on that operating table. The person who returned understood that there are truths beyond what spreadsheets can measure. I started noticing synchronicities everywhere. Numbers that used to just be data points suddenly carried meaning. I'd see 11 on the clock, right when I was doubting, as if the universe was winking at me, reminding me I'm on the right path. I'd randomly open books to exactly the page I needed. Strangers would approach me and say things I desperately needed to hear, then disappear before I could ask their names. The fear that had dominated my existence for 34 years, fear of death, fear of judgment, fear of not being enough, it evaporated. And in its place grew something I'd never experienced before, unshakable peace. Not happiness that depends on circumstances, but deep, cellular peace that remains constant, whether I'm having the best day of my life or the worst. My relationships transformed. I forgave my father for abandoning us when I was 7, something I'd sworn I'd never do. I reached out to my ex-best friend who'd betrayed me in college and apologized for my part in our falling out. I started seeing every person I encountered, from the CEO to the janitor, as divine beings wearing temporary human costumes, and that shift in perception changed everything. People started noticing. My colleagues at the firm would ask, "What happened to you? You're different." My mother cried when I told her the story, said she'd been praying for my spiritual awakening for years. My niece, who'd been struggling with depression and suicidal thoughts, spent 3 hours talking with me one night and told me afterward that our conversation saved her life, that she finally understood she wasn't broken, just awakening in a world that doesn't understand what that means. This is the evidence. This is proof that what Jesus showed me is real, not just philosophical theory or wishful thinking, but tangible transformation that ripples outward, touching everyone in proximity. And this is exactly what he said would happen as the end approaches. The awakened ones multiply. The consciousness shift accelerates. The old paradigm of fear and control begins to crumble, and institutions that built their power on keeping people small and scared start to panic. That's why we're seeing such chaos in the Vatican right now. Leadership changes, doctrine challenges, priests speaking out against centuries of dogma. The structure is destabilizing because it can't withstand the frequency of truth that's flooding the planet. December 2025 marks a cosmic turning point, the winter solstice where darkness gives way to returning light, and those who are ready will experience their own personal end, the end of living in fear, the end of spiritual confusion, the end of feeling separate from divine love. If you felt something missing in your faith, if church services leave you empty rather than fulfilled, if you've sensed that the religious teachings you inherited don't quite match the truth vibrating in your soul, that's not rebellion, that's recognition. Your spirit remembers what your mind has forgotten. You're already awakening. This video found you because you're ready for the next level of understanding. The choice before you is simple but profound. You can continue following tradition, accepting what authorities tell you about God and salvation and the end, staying comfortable in familiar fear. Or you can do what I did. You can open yourself to direct divine communication. You can test what I'm telling you against your own inner knowing. You can ask Jesus yourself in the quiet of your own heart, is this true? Is the end really about awakening rather than judgment? And I promise you, if you ask with genuine openness, you will receive an answer. Maybe not in words, maybe through a feeling, a synchronicity, a sudden knowing that settles in your chest and won't be shaken. That's the Holy Spirit doing exactly what Jesus said it would do, guiding you into all truth. Don't wait for your own near-death experience to wake up. Don't wait for tragedy or loss or rock bottom to force you into seeking deeper truth. You can choose awakening right now, today, in this moment. You can step into the end of illusion, and discover that what's on the other side isn't annihilation or judgment, but the most profound love you've ever experienced. Jesus showed me the end, and it wasn't an ending at all. It was the beginning of my true spiritual life, the beginning of living as the divine being I'd always been but never recognized, the beginning of experiencing heaven, not as a future destination I had to earn, but as a present reality I could access through consciousness. And that same beginning is available to you, right now, right here. If this resonates, if something in your soul is saying yes, that's not me convincing you. That's the Holy Spirit confirming truth. That's your awakening calling you home. Share this message with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below and tell me what part hit you the hardest. Don't let fear or tradition block you from the divine truth that's trying to reach you. The end is here, and it's the most beautiful beginning you could ever imagine.